Deadpool! This is the Chief
Yeah.
Ash.
Subpar Lobster.
Nick Fleury.
Alright, kids. So,
What up, guys? Okay, so in our little discussion of Deadpool, we're going to do things a little bit differently here instead. What we're going to do is we're going to each rate this movie kind of first number that jumps out of our head, 1 to 10. But that's not really why we're here. We're going to justify it. So why we thought that it deserves that number. So I think we're kind of all, not all over the board, but we're kind of on different parts of the board. So let's get into it. All right, who wants to start? Nick Fleury. Why don't you start?
Nick Fleury. I gave the movie a 9 because to me, I've been waiting for this movie for a long time. And when it came out, and I saw it in the theaters a few days ago, leaving the theater, I couldn't think of one bad thing about it. The only issue I had that I wish the movie was longer to expand on certain plot points. It was just, in there they were a little glossed over. But I really enjoyed the movie. And without being biased, I thought it worked well for what it was. All the meta jokes hit perfectly. It was very equally balanced with the tragedy, action, and comedy. It was just, to me, it was not perfect, but it's really hard trying to find something wrong with the movie.
Yeah,
it was very entertaining.
The meta writing was so smart. Like, they'd make a really stupid, joke or a pun, but then follow it up with, some really good, meta joke that was much deeper than the actual joke they were telling. I thought that was interesting.
yeah, it was really a true blue fan movie, right? And that was the studio going, all right, we're going to stop just telling you what you like and just listen to what you say on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when they called out
that's
X-Men...
probably how...
When they called out X-Men...
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, me too. When they called out XMen Origins, and he's like, "Well, sew your mouth together." I'm just like, that's no other movie would ever call out another.
No, you don't want to do that. Yeah.
So I kind of feel like this. You know how? Because I'm sure everyone knows the whole story, but basically how this movie got made was that they weren't going to do an R-rated superhero movie, and then they leaked that footage, and that got everyone super hype and kind of showed that the support was there. And so I think that it was kind of a point where Fox is like, oh, damn, now we have to make this movie and kind of let them do this, because otherwise, it'll just be, it's wasted money. So I find that kind of interesting that they probably were like, we can kind of get away with a lot of things that we probably wouldn't have been able to had the support not been there. Which I thought was a cool, Deadpool's always started as, a cult following hero that kind of just grew and grew, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and then they had that nice little homage in the movie by keeping the... They kept essentially that little scene from the trailer with slight little edits. So I was because when the commercials come out, there was a lot of differences in it, and I was just kind of like,
yeah.
Why not stick to the trailer? Just as a shout out to those fans that were, the original ones giving the views to that and writing about that and stuff. And they totally did. It just didn't come up in the trailers. Their marketing for this movie was amazing.
It would have been easy to keep that out. Just say, "Oh, you've seen this already. Let's get rid of it." But they kept it in in the movie. I did appreciate that as well.
And they kind of used it to bookend the entire story. It was the beginning, and then they just kind of picked up right from there. Oh, first of all, are we going into spoilers for this?
I mean, you already did.
Okay,
so
cool.
We're good.
We'll put a spoiler tag on it. But basically, what I think is awesome about this movie is it's straight up comic book fan service, more so than I've probably ever seen. And they go really far into it, things that you wouldn't expect. One thing I thought was cool is that Colossus has a different voice, but because the original character is Russian, they made him Russian sounding. Kind of sounds like a Saturday morning cartoon character, but I thought that was really interesting. Or the X-Men uniforms were the actual X-Men uniforms, so I like that. Even though it doesn't really it kind of is weird for the whole universe thing. They just were we're gonna do all these deep-seated comic book references. They had an X-Men character who literally was I was reading about her, but she was an X-Force character who dies the minute she gets introduced, and she was a main part of this movie.
Yeah, but her powers are completely different in the comics.
That's true.
I looked her up too because I had no idea who she was. Did you read why they had her in the movie?
No, I didn't.
It's very interesting.
The producers were going through and they were like, we want the coolest sounding hero in the X-Men universe. That's just what we want. So they went through and they found Negasonic Teenage Warhead. And they were like, we don't like her powers. Let's make her powers sound like her name, because that's cool.
Because
in the comics, she's just a telepath. Yeah. She's nothing really special. That would bother me on a regular basis, but if you're going to do that in a movie, Deadpool's a good movie to do it, because it breaches all that. I'd probably give the movie 8 or 9, by the way. I never really said it.
Yeah, no, totally. So I was about to lead into that. So, why... So, 8 or 9, I don't know. If you were going to say 8.5, why would you justify that?
Well, okay, so I mean, the movie, like, no one can look at that movie and be like, that was a bad movie. It was very well rounded, and it was made to please the fans. Therefore, the people like us, anybody in our age group that has an idea of who Deadpool is, we automatically responded to it. So instead of playing around with the canon like early X-Men days where we just kind of fuck around and change up things on the people who know and love that, they're like, oh, no, we're gonna pretty much stick straight to the book here and just essentially like make a new it's like a new issue to the story, except now it's on film,
And
so
if you didn't know Deadpool
I feel like it's probably one of the best comic book adaptations, period. Like, there's a couple pretty decent ones out there, but this one stayed really true blue to some of the Deadpool lore. Like, I don't know it all. I know some of it, but yeah, I don't know. It was good in that aspect to me. I don't know. The only thing that was a little with me, which is super small. It was just there was a lot less fighting, and when there was, it was very short. So it was a lot less actiony, which could be good, could be bad. It was balanced out by good dialogue, so it was still a really good movie. I agree with Nick Fleury in the fact that I feel like it needed to be longer. I wanted to see a little deeper of a plot, but it was still, the plot was solid and it was there, and there was nothing wrong with it. I just wanted to see it go just a little bit further. And the fact that your little end credit scene, they essentially announced the sequel. That's good enough for me to go over it. But
I like that little fake out too, where they're like, everyone, at least in my theater, was expecting it, and he pulls the curtain back, it just says Deadpool, and that's it. And you're just like, yeah.
See, the problem with that movie had, like Subpart Losses, they really wanted the PG-13 rating in the beginning, and because of this, they didn't really have.
Well, let's clarify: the filmmakers didn't. The producers wanted it. The filmmakers wanted it.
Filmmakers really pushed for an R, especially Ryan Reynolds, and they didn't have much faith in it, so they really didn't give them the money they needed to fill in. They had to take some characters out of the script, do rewrites just to adjust for the money they didn't have.
And then comment on it and just be like, oh, look, there's not enough X-Men in this script.
And who else to acknowledge this than Deadpool?
Like, that movie was a big middle finger to the studio, which I thought was kind of amazing. So I want to bring up that you guys both said that you didn't have flaws with the movie, and I'm having trouble because I feel like I do have a flaw with the movie, but I can't tell if it's a flaw or if it's actually just the perfect Deadpool movie in that sense. So my biggest thing, I was watching it, and I was initially like, wow, this is super formulaic. Like, yeah, the movie itself, it's kind of one of those perfect examples of take something that's like a well-told story and then just add your own flair to it. Kind of reminded me of like how Scott Pilgrim was that same old get the girl story, but with so much style and flair that it made it its unique thing. And I thought that was kind of the same idea, where it was like super like he goes after the girl and has the whole big like final scene, and she jumps out and makes that one last stab so he can get the villain and stuff like that. But in the same way, like I feel like it was done that way to be kind of meta in its own sense, if that makes sense. Like I feel like it was made to be formulaic in a sense to be meta about the formula of superhero movies. And that's the thing I think is interesting about this movie, is as much as there are like a lot of toilet humor and like dumb jokes, it goes so much deeper with like how it thinks about how do we make a good like fourth wall breaking movie, and how do we bring a character who essentially makes fun of the Marvel universe and like the fact that he's a comic book character and make that like into the movies. And I thought that was a very interesting take. So as much as I was like at first like, oh wait, I think this is kind of a very like as much as interesting and creative this movie is, they kind of copped out. And then I was like, wait a minute, they just take it one step further and use that trope to then further talk about superhero stories and kind of be meta in that regard. And I kind of lean towards that latter idea. But they did so much right as far as the Deadpool character goes and how they like approached everything, that it doesn't make sense to me that they would be like, oh yeah, and then we'll just do a guy goes after the girl plot.
I think to clarify, I never said it was flawless.
No,
the movie was good enough that the flaws it did have were small enough for me to just be like, meh, nothing. Because you guys know how I am with movies. Like, the thing will just fucking bug me through the whole movie, and then it just ruins the movie for me essentially. And this movie, I was so concentrated on just everything that kept happening because I didn't notice them. So the as many flaws as there may have been, they were small and they were done in such a way it didn't actually bother me.
It's
And
like me
also,
in Star Wars.
this style of movie is kind of hard to. It's kind of hard to box into like a regular, like movie rules,
Yeah.
Because like typically I'll kill somebody for like staring at the camera. Like I hate that. If I catch an actor
this
glancing
movie.
at the camera, and not the thing. Then some of your Oscar winners have done that, and people just like, oh no, that was something else, blah blah blah. But if you don't look at me, but like Deadpool, one of his big things is when he looks at the camera. That's funny to us. That's acceptable to us. So a lot of those rules and a lot of those little tropes like that I fall into and that I don't like, they apply it like essentially Deadpool. He lives in that, right? Like a lot of anything that puts me out of the movie, I don't like it. But Deadpool has that. He's that bridge, right? You're not supposed to be in the movie. You're supposed to know you're watching a movie because he likes to point it out.
Yeah.
Right?
And there was a flaw, I think, in it. To me, I was thinking to myself while watching the movie, when Deadpool visits the Xavier's mansion, the school for gifted youngsters, he knocks on the door, and niggas on a teenage warhead asks, why, of all the X-Men in the world, why is she answering the door? And I felt that was a problematic for me. And then later on, Deadpool says, the line, I feel like the studio can't afford any of the X-Men. To me, that was perfect because whatever like for future movies, whatever flaws they have, Deadpool has the privilege of acknowledging it, and I guess it makes it better.
It's kind of like when you're a kid and like you're in school and like something goes wrong and you're like, I get my homework wasn't an A, but it's because of this reason it wasn't an A. It's kind of like that where they were like, we get that we have issues, but look, this is why we have issues. But no, so
go ahead.
You don't have to be apologetic for it.
Yeah,
and in that it makes it really hard to like be able to pick out flaws because he points them out and it turns a flaw into a good thing. You're like, oh, that was fucking hilarious. I'm glad that was there.
So as much as I initially was kind of thrown off by like whether the movie, like how the whole thing about like the narrative, the one thing that I do think is a problem with this movie, and I don't think it's actually the filmmaker's fault whatsoever, is that it's not. Deadpool's whole shtick is that he is so good about like weaving in and out of different parts of the Marvel universe and just like playing with that idea, so that like when you make a standalone Deadpool movie and you don't have much of the Marvel universe to play around with, it's kind of hard. I think what they did did a really good job with, but like I would love for either an X-Men movie or another Deadpool movie to incorporate way more of the Fox X-Men and even Fantastic Four. Like I think that was the only issue with this movie is he was so closed off from the rest of the universe that like a lot of the Deadpool jokes that usually work so well in the comics, just they couldn't do it. And they did it really well with what they could, but I just like, that's why I'm so glad they threw in that call out where he's like, we couldn't have more X-Men in this movie, because I feel like that was like the one thing that you're like, this is what I want more out of the movie. And it's not like the movie's fault, it's the producers. Pretty much the producers like holding it back.
Well, the licensing kills all good movies, essentially. Like that, I mean, that's what that comes down to, and also the fact that the X-Men universe is constantly fleeting, and he even points that out when he has a little snark at which professor it is.
Yeah.
And then like Fantastic Four, where it stands, there's not an established Fantastic Four universe either. So as much as they probably wanted to include more, they kind of had to just kind of.
Obviously, they don't have Iron Man.
MCU is really what we got. That's standard. Anything outside the MCU is still fleeting. Like, there's rumors of the entire X-Men franchise just ending soon. Like, it's So it's one of those things. It's all licensing. So it's one of those. Like the fact that they couldn't do that, they did awesome. But anyway,
it's funny.
Instead of go.
It's funny that even the fourth wall breaking Deadpool can't really fight licensing issues, because I remember reading that the aircraft carrier in the end of the Deadpool
was supposed to be the Shield helicarrier.
Was supposed to be the helicarrier, but because of licensing, they couldn't use it.
So
it was supposed to be originally one of the downed aircraft helicarriers from
Avengers,
Captain America: Winter Soldier.
Oh, okay,
but they couldn't do it because of licensing.
So that's I know we have to end soon, but I think one thing is really important to bring up for this movie is that like, as cool as this is, it kind of highlights something that we kind of will never be able to have, and that's kind of the what they're aiming to have, this connected movie universe that you get the same kind of experience you get as if you were reading these Marvel comics. They want to kind of emulate that in the movies, but I feel like we might never get there. We might get really close, but we might never fully do that because like how people own companies and how licensing has worked, they've completely fragmented it. And I feel like Deadpool, if nothing else, was a really, really important like movie to kind of highlight that like, look, we want to do this thing where we want to have the perfect like Marvel movie universe where we can have all these heroes like going in and out of each other's movies and telling these different stories, but we can't because we have three companies that were all kind of up for bidding wars 10 years ago, and now they're all segmented off. So it's like, as much as I think that's what this movie is probably the most important, besides being an amazing, awesome adaptation of the character, I think the most important part of this movie is just the fact that it's like this is the first movie that really like highlights the fact that like look, we can't have like that perfect like world Marvel movie universe, so we have to kind of just work with what we have.
Yeah, and on a side note with that, did any of you guys read Deadpool's Note to Parents?
I did not.
Obviously, you don't want kids to see this. Deadpool's Note to Parents says it's like literally it's a note from Deadpool. But it's not funny. It's literally that him just asking parents not to bring their kids to the movies because that was why everyone was so mad about the PG-13 because their kids wanted to see Deadpool.
Yeah.
And it's his thing. And he's like, if your kids want to see a superhero movie, he says take them to go see Captain America's Civil War. He doesn't say anything about X-Men Apocalypse in the future. He says Captain America's Civil War. So in that there has been that attempt to branch out. So they won't sue him for saying it was Ryan Reynolds, I think. But they wouldn't sue him for saying that just because that's just promoting. He's literally telling people, don't see my movie with your kids. And go to Captain America, giving them the sales. That's highly respectable. It's awesome.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
When Chief Astronaut started a film a few days ago, there were children in the movie. And like, not even halfway through, they left because they were cursing.
A bunch of my family has like kids that they're sending.
There's a lot of nudity.
Oh, yeah. A lot of nudity. That nice Ryan Reynolds ass. But no, I know a bunch of people in my family who have like 10-year-old kids who are like, I love Deadpool, and I'm like, that's awesome, but this movie is like totally not, I guess, appropriate for you. Straight up, my daughter was 13 and this movie came out. I would totally probably take her to it because I feel like enough of the violence and the sex in it is so kind of cartoony almost that it's worth. I think it's okay. But that's probably just a
13, right? You 13. Said 13.
Yeah.
13 is so much better because the kids that were in ours were like
8 or 9,
maybe 8.
Yeah,
like
that's crazy.
This is not a movie for kids, guys.
No,
don't
take your kids if they're under 10 unless they're really badass. If your kids are badass, then take them. No, so we're gonna have to wrap this up because we're running obviously super late on time. But I think that this is a cool movie to go see, even if you're not super into Deadpool. If you're just interested, this is kind of like the filmmakers saying, "Hey, we want the Marvel Universe to work." And this is kind of one of the first attempts we see of them kind of lashing out against the initial like confines of the studio. So if nothing else, just see it for that and support it for that, because I think that's what's important, really, at the end of the day, as far as the bigger picture.
That's not the only thing. It's hilarious and it's well done.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome.
It's a good movie.
It's the best superhero adaptation.
Perfectly cast as Deadpool.
Hyperbole.
Totally.
Anyway, guys, this has been our show about Deadpool. If you guys want to hear us more talk about Deadpool, because I'm sure we could and you guys could, jump in on the comments below. Let's get talking about it. Let's, really tear this movie apart. It'd be awesome.
Give us some suggestions, guys.
Yes.
Come on.
Any good horror movies you want me to watch? I'll watch them. I don't care if they're shitty.
Well, I mean,
anyways, guys, keep watching. This has been the Chief Ash,
Nick Fleury,
and Subpar Lobster.
Have a good night.
Adios.
With that.